Well, it's that time again, that time when we mosey on into the local virtual watering hole to sort through the information and misinformation that answers the question, just exactly how much American land does China own? I'm joined by Ken. I'm your host, Christopher Antone, and this is three pastors walk into a bar. I forgot my name.
Uh-oh.
It happens.
Uh-oh.
It happens. When you reach 30 years old, it happens. Because, 30.
Aging is not for the weak.
It is not for the faint of heart. That's for sure. Like, there's things that I used to be able to do that I just can't do anymore. Like, remember my name. Stuff like that.
That usually happens walking out the bar.
Yeah. Yeah, that's happening with increasing frequency these days. Just the inability to remember like basic things. Like I'll even forget things like while I'm preaching. Like if I'm trying to think of like a certain type of thing. Like yesterday, I couldn't think of prosperity gospel for some reason. Right. I just could not get it to surface. There's just too much clutter up there. It's just too much paperwork up there. Somehow I got to sort through that filing system and get it kind of organized. There's got to be a program for that.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, if you could like just kind of read through something and it kind of reorganize the folders in your head. Elon needs to work on that.
Come on, Elon.
Yeah. I mean, he's working on this Neuralink thing. I mean, after you're done with the paraplegics and, the people that can't walk and stuff like that, can you make us a chip to organize our brains? That would be helpful.
Yes.
Yeah. Even one that you could put like a memory card in and just like kind of put data into it,
Well, if you could, if you could store your 25-year-old Chris Antone memory in the cloud, then you get 60, 65 years old. You have the opportunity to reboot
to a 25-year-old brain.
Would you?
That would be genius.
Would you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure I would. Yeah, 100%.
Lose 40 years worth of memory?
Yeah, well, you're going to lose it anyways. So
good point.
I mean, it's all going to be gone anyways. What's the point in holding on to it? Yeah. Just make new memories with a better brain.
Give you a report where you can see the line going down. Your memory has just passed. 26 years old. If you reboot in the next 12 months, you'll break even.
You only get a 12-month warranty too. Yeah, I mean, you could probably, it'd be cool if you could like upload like certain memories, because it'd be nice to remember some things like that happened after 25, like the birth of my children. Mm-hmm. Like that would kind of suck to be like, oh, well, who are you again? But I mean, if you went into dementia, you'd be like that anyways.
Right.
So, but you wouldn't be able to retain memory anymore. So yeah, maybe there's something to be said about that. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll get right on that. I'll ask him if he'll come on the show.
Yeah, he should jump right on, I would imagine. Imagine there's not going to be a problem with that.
He's done everything else.
Yeah. Hey, hit us with the disclaimer.
All right. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the respective speakers and do not necessarily reflect the opinions, policies, or doctrines of Athol Baptist Church and its members.
Yeah, we would print that and just put it on the podcast like metadata, but it's fun to read. People really enjoy it.
We're going to have to start handing that out on Sunday mornings.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so, well, Yeah, let's not get into
Yeah,
that.
that's another. Maybe not on air.
So, anyways, after the Chinese spy balloon incident in 2023, I can recall a lot of suspicion, speculation, and conspiracy in social media, news media about how much property China owned in America. Like, how much American land does China own? Not only how much land they had purchased, but where that land was located at. In some cases, it was near military facilities, infrastructure facilities. So, it looked rather suspicious, the locations of these purchases. The most recent one of those being that one where they just purchased that bulk of land next to that Army Reserve base, which is, I mean, maybe we could have a reservist email us and let us know what the tactical benefits of being next to a reserve military base would be. Is there enough defensive infrastructure in a reserve military facility that it would merit buying the land next to it? That's the question that I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's not readily available, that kind of information. I know there's reservists that work on regular military bases, but I don't know what's on a Army Reserve, say for instance, military base or military facility, because I don't think they have bases. They have facilities.
Yeah.
Like, you can drive by them, you can see like they have vehicles and all that kind of stuff, and
old stuff.
I would imagine they have armories. But like, is it enough that if you were a foreign actor, you would think to yourself, I need to buy land next to that facility for tactical?
Yeah, I just can't imagine there being that big of a benefit of being right next door to something that if you were going to launch an offensive, you couldn't just drop in anywhere you want to go.
Yeah. Or immigrate in people to generate cells like the terrorists do.
Covert ops kind of stuff. I mean, you're really tipping your hand if you want to move in next door.
Yeah. It doesn't, it seems kind of weird to me to think that is some kind of like military stratagem. I mean, if that were the case, then all of our enemies would be coming in and buying land, because I think that's one of the things that people don't understand about the United States of America is that the likelihood of us being invaded is so marginal. I mean, the percentages of a successful invasion in the United States of America is like below 1%. It's astronomically difficult, not just because we only have 2 land borders, but gosh, the amount of firearms that are in the United States of America makes the United States of America the largest standing citizen army in the world. And then just put on top of that the topography. I mean, the terrain of the United States of America is crazy.
It's really diverse.
It's just, you would really have to have a serious engagement. Like the whole idea of Red Dawn is nonsensical.
Yeah.
It would never happen. I mean,
couldn't move that many people that fast, undetected.
No.
And we have free countries bordering us on the north and the south. So nobody can get within 1,000 miles of us that we don't know about. And that we don't.
I mean, it seems to me like if you really wanted to get a foothold in North America to take over America, what you would do first is you would take over either Mexico or Canada.
That would be a threat.
I mean, if I were playing Risk, that's what I would do, because there's way too many cannons and cavalrymen in America. But Canada, there's a few infantry over there. I think I could take them with 3 dice. Just saying, in Risk terms. But, I mean, in any case, we do know that they're purchasing land for whatever purpose. And however that benefits or doesn't benefit us, I guess, is what's up for debate today, or at least conversation. So, paranoia concerning China hasn't abated over the past year. So today we're going to take an objective look at this issue and hopefully shed some light on the truth of it, because I mean, that's what we do here. We really want to kind of know the truth about what's going on. And this is a pretty important topic, particularly with like everything going the way that it is. I mean, it's just, there's some really crazy stuff going on. Like Russia just launched the first intercontinental ballistic missile ever launched at another country. Did you know that?
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I knew they launched something big, but I didn't know it was the first of its kind.
Yep. First of its kind launched at another country. There's been plenty of ICBMs launched, but never one at another country.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of just, I think it was just kind of like Putin saying, look, guys, I could end this tomorrow.
Yeah, some serious saber rattling.
Well, and I mean, to be fair, Biden just approved Ukraine to launch long-range missiles into Ukraine. So, those guys are messing around with World War III over there. And then you have, what's going on in Israel. People are just getting really tired of Israel. And, it's like, then Trump gets into office and you have all these leaders calling Trump. It's like, it's almost like the world is waiting for him to get into office so that it can be at peace again. But until then, the powers that be are going to try and destroy as much as possible.
Mm.
It's just what it seems like. I don't know that that's true. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. But it just seems that way. The military industrial complex is just trying to ramp up as much as they can, I guess, to make as much money as they can.
Yeah, it seems like the unrest is ratcheted up the last 6 months.
Yeah. Everywhere, seems like. And then you got North Korea coming into Russia to help them in Ukraine. I mean, I wonder if that's actually a benefit. I wonder if Putin was like, oh, come on, guys, can you just send some money? I mean, or something. It's like, it's kind of like one of them gifts you get at Christmas. It's like opening up a gift from your grandma and it being like
you
underwear.
Shouldn't have.
Wow, thank you. You shouldn't have, really. And Putin's looking at all these troops coming in, getting addicted to pornography.
And he has to feed them.
And he has to feed them. He has to take care of them.
Move them.
Yep.
And
gosh,
medical care. And yeah.
So bonkers. So, in any case, how much land does China own? I guess is the first question, the first thing that we looked into. And while there's been a lot of talk about how much land they own, actually the amount of U.S. land that the Chinese government or China owns, and I'm not sure if it's Chinese government, it's probably Chinese corporations, which probably is basically the same.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all a government kind of, well, it's a socialist country. So, but as of 2021, China owned less than 1% of all foreign land held in the entire, or in the U.S. So there are countries that own a lot more land than China.
Mm-hmm.
One of them being Canada, which I thought was weird.
This is kind of unexpected.
Yeah, they hold 12.8 million acres, which is more than the entire area of Vermont and New Hampshire combined. Let that sink in for a minute. Mm-hmm. Where's my sink? Where's Elon with his sink? Let that sink in. Yeah, that's bonkers, man. Like, how does a government own? And is that the Canadian government? Is it like a government facilities, or is it like Canadian industry?
From what I read, it's mostly timber companies.
Timber companies?
Yeah. And most of that land is in the extreme northeast states. So they have a significant impact on those local, state, and regional economies and politics, right?
Yeah. Well, and even if they don't own it, I mean, they obviously they own the land that they're harvesting lumber off of, which I don't know how I feel about that actually. But even if they don't own it, even some federally owned land is being leased out to foreign agencies as well. Like I know that there's that mine in Idaho that is being leased out to Australian mining companies, and they're mining precious metals out of Idaho and sending all that to Australia. So there's a lot of foreign kind of influence in the United States of America when it comes to land ownership, land usage, which is wild.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess why is it that American companies are regulated out of business, but you can lease out land to foreign agencies to strip mine precious metals? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, I guess there's no money in American industry for those players, but that's kind of crazy that that Canada owns so much, and that China only owns 1% of all the land owned by foreign governments or by foreign agencies, foreign corporations, foreign groups.
One that struck me was, and I believe this is correct, I'd have to go back and verify it, but I believe Iran actually owns more than China does. But it's flying right under the radar.
Why don't people talk about that?
Yeah.
Why is it that China got the lion's share of that conversation?
My theory is China's the new Nazi Germany. You know, it's like we've always had a country that we wanted to hate.
Yeah.
And I think China's the new kid on the block. Well, it's not really new, but it's the current one that everybody wants to hate China.
Maybe. I mean, Iran's definitely a better country to hate if you're going to hate a country. You know, Iran's definitely right up there, particularly with a lot of the kind of progressive left. You would think that they would really hate Palestine, Iran, Iraq, all these countries over there because of their fundamentalist Islamic slant.
Like suppressing and oppressing women.
Oh, they hate everything that the progressive left stands for.
Everything. But there's this odd sympathy. I think that's just the left's constant need for an underdog.
Yeah, you know, I mean, in talking about that, you know, I mean, it's like the left has always been like I hate to kind of use this terminology, but it's always been the party of compassion over logic. So, you know, it's always like we need more federal funding for aid to homeless people, more federal funding to aid for women, more federal funding to aid for, you know, X, Y, or Z, you know, so it's always pumping into social programs because they have more compassion than they have critical thinking. Whereas the Republican Party ends up being more critically thinking and less compassionate. And they kind of that dichotomy is needed in order to balance out the government, which is what you see when you see like these monumental shifts like we just saw with Trump. You know, you can only go so far left before you start feeling the pain of the lack of critical thinking when it comes to fiscal policy, when it comes to immigration policy, you know, things like that. And then people are like, okay, we got to get a rein on this. So even people that are progressive end up starting to vote for a little bit more because people get it subconsciously. If they don't get it consciously, you know, it's like they understand that, oh, we need a shift of power because things are getting a little crazy. And so that balance, I think, is one of the best things that we have going for us, which is a good argument for a two-party system. But in any case, my point is that, you know, the left being that party of compassion, without the logic, it's like they do have this like need to care for people that don't want to be cared for, and you see that played out like in Palestine. Like, you know, if a whole group of those protesters, those pro-Palestine protesters, were to go to Gaza Strip and walk around in their normal kind of life as whatever they represent, there's a fair chance that a good majority of them would just be murdered in the street thrown off of rooftops because the fundamentalist Islamic jihadists, they just wouldn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
They'd kill every one of them. And then, of course, then the progressive left would somehow blame that on Israel, because it's just like this weird cycle of just craziness.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why people like conservatives who are researching this kind of stuff, there is a better enemy to focus on, that if we could get people to wake up about how evil that these people are, then there could be a point of uniting for the American people. But we tend to focus our conspiracies into things like China buying up all the land. It's like, well, China's not buying up all the land according to the numbers. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're doing it through shell companies or through American shell companies or whatever. Maybe you can trace. Maybe if you got a big cork board and you got about 100 miles of red twine, you could kind of link them all together, and kind of and probably Bill Gates is in the middle of it, and George Soros is in the middle of it, obviously, and Davos is in the middle of it, and so all of it's kind of tied together. Klaus is in there somewhere, I'm sure. But when you get conspiracies layered so intricately like that, it's hard to get people to get on board with supporting the idea. Whereas, if you just simplify it to say, well, Iran owns more land than China does, and Iran has these policies that clearly demonstrate that they hate your ideals. So why don't we team up and start talking about how we deal with these people, instead of arguing and bickering over how much, land Bill Gates owns, because what we need something to unite over. We don't need anything else to divide over. We got enough of that already, so I don't understand why, we can't, as conservatives, kind of focus on things wisely. It's like, can we really do anything about the 1% of land owned by foreign agencies that is owned by Chinese companies? Can we really do anything about that? And would anybody even care? Well, probably not. I mean, you're talking about 1% of land owned by foreign agencies. I mean, that's not a lot. Who owns more? Oh, Iran does? Oh, well, they're Looney Tunes. Let's talk about them. I don't know.
Yeah, there have been some cases where Chinese companies had purchased land, and then it was discovered that there were nefarious purposes behind it. Let's see if I can find this one here where I started. Okay, so I'm reading from a Heritage Foundation white paper that kind of looked into this issue, and they cite several examples. And this one is perfectly illustrating AFIDA's shoddy enforcement. So the AFIDA is a foreign investment agency of the U.S. government that is supposed to review land purchases for things like national security threats, etc. And so this is the agency that's supposed to be the watchdog over
a federal agency, no less.
Yes, federal.
They do have 4 letters, which makes them better, right?
In January 2024, so just this year, a U.S. magazine revealed that Chinese billionaire and Chinese Communist Party member Chen Tiangao, I think, hope that's somewhere close, was, unbeknownst to the U.S. government, the second largest foreign owner of U.S. agricultural land. Number 2. Chen had purchased nearly 200,000 acres of Oregon timberland in 2015 through a company named Whitefish Cascade Forest Resources before later transferring the property to his family office, which revealed his ownership of the property through tax records. Embarrassingly, the USDA told the press that the department became aware of Chen's land holdings through the publication of Oregon's 2023 tax records and subsequent reporting. Even though forest land is considered agricultural land for the purposes of federal review. After Chen's ownership was revealed, his family office quickly issued a statement which further revealed that the transaction had been approved by this other agency, which ignored his potential non-compliance with the first agency's requirements. Chen's Oregon holdings alone likely indicate that current federal reporting underestimates Chinese agricultural land ownership in the United States by at least 50%.
Oh, wow.
So we have federal agencies. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. They have
Or they're-
contradictory requirements.
Or they're
and
being
reporting.
paid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they're being paid to just greenlight these things.
Yep. And it just goes on and on, different instances of that. Another one that comes to mind is the Korean company Huawei, who makes networking components. Remember the whole cell phone tower hardware issue that everybody was really concerned about, that those routers
were all Chinese made.
Send data to China. So it's, the tech sector is particularly sensitive and vulnerable to these kind of things. So we have to be careful what we buy and use for critical infrastructure in this country.
Yeah. There doesn't seem to be any concern over that at all.
Not a lot, not enough for sure.
Well, I had read something as well that was kind of alarming about China, in that their purchasing of land has increased by like 30% since 2019.
Yeah.
So
It's definitely
it's on
sped
the
up.
rise. Like, they've figured out that they can purchase land and that nobody is doing anything about it. And so they're just going to keep on doing it. And so there does seem to be, though, this kind of focus on agricultural land, which seems to be mostly timber. That's odd.
A lot of timber, a lot of corn.
Why
Wheat.
timber? Is it something that they don't have a lot of? Well, they're
Well-
not shipping it out, obviously. Well, maybe they are.
I don't know. It's become, more and more valuable here to us Americans, as you know, if you've tried building a house lately, how expensive wood products are, and so the rate at which that has increased has gone up and creates a profit opportunity to anybody.
Yeah, still, when you think about it, if China owns, like what I'm reading here, 384,000 acres of American agricultural land, I mean, that still pales in comparison to 12.8 million acres,
Mm-hmm.
Owned by other nations, other companies in other nations. Does China allow foreign countries to purchase Chinese land?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I'd be curious to know that. I'm gonna ask Gemini. Let's see what Gemini says. Because, AI will help us. Right? So does China allow purchase of Chinese land from foreign companies?
So it's interesting to note that of the top countries owning U.S. land, besides Canada and China, the others are mostly friendly countries to the United States. The Netherlands holds 12% of all foreign land, Italy 7%, UK 6%, Germany 6%, China less than 1%. The remaining 15.6 million acres are split up among another 100 countries, including India, Saudi Arabia, and Iran.
So all these countries have companies within them that are just purchasing land to do industry or business for
states.
individuals. The answer to that question is no. China does not allow foreign companies to purchase land directly, as all China is owned by the state and collectives, meaning foreigners can only acquire the right to use the land through leases or similar arrangements. They cannot outright buy land in China.
Makes sense. They're pretty hard line about stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that that's a problem. Even in a capitalist society, I know that kind of runs against the ideas of capitalism. And I guess there is a piece of that where you can argue for, and we'll get into that about the merits of industry, foreign industry working in our nation. But couldn't that same thing be done through leases?
Probably to a large degree, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense that we're selling off our sovereignty for the sake of capitalism. You know, I mean, I'm a big fan of capitalism, but also there's something about having land. You know, it's like it's the most valuable resource you have.
Yeah.
God's not making any more of it. So, you know, it seems a bad choice to allow foreign powers, whether they're corporate or whether they're governmental, to own land that is sovereignly within the borders of the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me wonder what could be done about that. Could you just rip those up? Like say, okay, you no longer own this land. Come and do something about it.
It's the year of Jubilee. We're taking it back.
I mean, really? Yeah, I mean, maybe that's morally wrong. I don't know. Is it morally wrong to take back what sovereignly belongs to the people?
Oh, let your yes be yes and your no be no.
I know, right? It's kind of a complicated situation, but you know, it's especially if these countries are adverse to the United States of America. Like, to me, there should be no reason that Iran owns title deed to any soil in the United States of America. We shouldn't even have an embassy for Iran in the United States of America. I'm even of the opinion that the UN doesn't belong in the United States of America. They do not. You don't get land. Like, if we want to give sovereign land to ambassadors that are from countries that are supportive of us, then fine. You know, but if it's a country that's adversarial to us, no. You don't get any special treatment over here. And I would think, you know, I mean, if I ever became president, that would be one of the things that I would check into. Is like, okay, well, what happens if I go to these companies that have sold this land to China, and I go to China and I say, look, we're going to buy this land back at the price you bought it at, period. Or we're going to take it back by force. Which one do you want? And let them choose.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, how much land was taken by conquest?
Mm-hmm.
All of it.
We were willing to fight for it then.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so it seems to me like it should be. I don't know. I'm just kind of going off on a rant now. I don't know. It's whatever. Anyways, so there are. I mean, I get it. There's national security concerns. You know, I mean, you know, when you have nations buying land, you can put whatever you want to on. You build underground bases. You can do whatever you want to on it. It's kind of concerning.
So what's encouraging for Idahoans, I'm looking at this map of foreign ownership by county, and that kind of shows a pretty interesting picture. And for Idahoans, Idaho, it appears, has the largest number of acres under county control that do not allow any foreign investment in land. So it looks like it's probably 20% or so. Right through central Idaho, extending down into Boise, into Ada County. And then states where you'd expect it to be pretty hardline aren't really so much. So, like, there's a lot of foreign investment in Texas, think oil. There's considerable investment in counties in California, not in the breadbasket counties. But, yeah, Idaho's pretty strict about it. And I believe we also have a law that forbids foreign direct investment in the state of Idaho.
Really?
It's one of the few states.
Interesting. Like, that's in our Constitution, or is it just like
I think it's just code.
So, for against selling of assets or land to foreign agencies?
Let's see if I can find the fact here.
While you're looking for it, you know, I mean, I guess there are like economic benefits to that. You know, you're doing business with all these things that can stimulate local economies. I mean, if you get a company that comes in that's logging, I suppose that you get that company that will be creating logging jobs. Mining companies, even like farms, would be hiring people to manage those farms. So I guess there's, something to be said about the economic benefit of it. But I mean, that same thing could be said about an American company. So I'm not sure why it is within our best interest to be selling to foreign corporations to have this job growth that they may or may not, bring to the table. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the numbers for their economic benefit would be. I would think it would have to be substantial for the juice to be worth the squeeze, in my opinion. So there are arguments against Chinese land purchases. One of those arguments is obviously the national security risks. But I mean, what are you going to do with a bunch of timberland? Or like we were saying, it's like you own, 20 acres, 100 acres, 1,000 acres next to a Army Reserve facility or a military base. It's like, okay, well, now what? What do you do with that? Are you going to, with the military being right next door, are you going to sneak in a bunch of stuff to build an underground facility so that you can take over this base in the event that you decide to take? I mean, what would be the end goal of having that land next to that base? I mean, are you preventing them from, expanding the base? I mean, I think that's probably the reason things like eminent domain actually exist. I mean, it's like you can't prevent the infrastructure when it's beneficial to the entire community, and so, if you're going to have land next to an Air Force base, for instance, and they need another runway to be able to send off or land, B-1s, it's like, okay, well, by eminent domain, we're just going to claim this land. We're going to give you fair market value for it. Mm-hmm. So there's already mechanisms in place for that. And if you're going to have people stationed in the woods, are you going to be with binoculars, like looking over? I mean, you could do that with satellites. Mm-hmm. So I'm not
drones.
Yeah. Drones, balloons, that the government's not going to do anything about. They're just going to let it fly around, do whatever it wants. So I just really don't, I don't buy this argument. I don't think that there's a strategic advantage to having the land. There might be a strategic advantage to the finances that are produced by the land, but at less or at 1% of the total owned, even if it's increased by 50%, it's 1.5% of total land owned by Chinese interests. It's like how much GDP is that actually producing? I mean, you're talking about like 500,000 acres. I mean, that's like a single state. You can't run a nation on a single state.
Not China.
Not China. No way. And it's not even enough to be even consequential. That's that kind of income. If you were trying to send it over to China, that kind of income would be consumed before it even got here through the process of industry itself. By the time you tiered it all over, I mean, if you're producing lumber, you got to imagine you're selling that lumber for a certain amount of money. Your profit margin is this, after you pay all the people. And if you're paying American wages to log this land, it's like you're not making a whole heap of money to support China off of that.
Well, there's a reason why the logging industry in America is almost dead, and we're buying our lumber from Canada. Is our economies, it just hasn't been as profitable as it was for a long time.
Yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It kind of goes along with that economic dominance kind of argument. It's like some people worry that China is trying to influence the U.S. economy. It's like you're gonna have to buy a lot more land than that to influence the economy.
There are better ways to do it than that.
Yeah, I mean, you could manipulate the value of the dollar in a lot of different ways. The best way to do that would be to pull the dollar off of buying oil.
Yeah.
If you could get rid of the petrodollar, you could cripple the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then, I mean, and they could easily do that because China's already in league with a lot of those Middle Eastern states.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they were already talking about doing that. China and Russia, what was the tri-pack that they had created? It was China,
Iran, and Venezuela.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's like it's legitimately possible that they could pull the petrodollar off of the trade of that oil, and create a new kind of market for oil. And that would really damage America's economy.
That's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. We keep talking about drilling less and producing less oil in this country to reduce our dependence on it. Well, if we're not producing much oil, we don't really have much of an argument to be the petrodollar anymore.
Not really.
Not as really. Much as other countries who are producing much more. So there is a bigger economic interest in that we sustain a certain amount of ownership of the world's oil market.
Oh, yeah. There was yeah, that's why when Trump took office, my father-in-law called, and Kim answered the phone, and she was asking him how he felt about Trump getting into office, and he was like, "Drill, baby, drill," because people know, it's like if we want to be wealthy again, we have to start producing, and one thing that we have a lot of is oil.
Natural resources.
We've got a lot of oil, a lot of coal, we have a lot of fossil fuels that are just not being tapped. And, maybe there's some wisdom to that, at some point, letting it linger long enough so that other markets begin to decline so that you can step in. But, at that point also you're having to race against innovation. So, there's a lot of factors involved with that, but yeah, we've got to start producing oil again. We've got to get the pipelines going. We got to get that stuff and get it into the market and sell it. It's like, I like what, Trump was saying, it's like if we could get that going again and we could start producing that, we could pay off our debt and we could have enough money left over that we could create a wealth market, kind of like Montana has, where it's like they sell enough oil, they sell enough fossil fuels that they have a wealth market that they give back to the people. So people get a check from the sale of the fossil fuels that is in the soil. Can you imagine that, not being in debt and everybody getting a check?
Mm-hmm.
But there's enough there to do that.
Well, Alaska's been doing it for decades.
Exactly.
And it sustains people up there who probably couldn't otherwise stay there.
Yeah.
Or above the poverty level.
I don't know what show it was, but there was an excerpt from this show. And Billy Bob Thornton was the kind of chief guy in it. And there was this, I guess she was an activist or an environmentalist or something, and they were talking about wind turbines. And he went on this rant about how obnoxious that they are. It's like he was asking her, it's like, how much petroleum do you think it takes to create that windmill? Not only to create it, but to lube it, to maintain it. He said just within the production of it, it'll never pay for its carbon footprint. Just the production and the maintenance of it. Mm-hmm. And he says, and if they were actually efficient at creating energy, do you not think that Exxon would have an entire state covered in these things? But they just don't produce that much. Mm-mm. And then she got on a little bit more about it. And he was like, it's in everything you got. The road we drove in on, the tires that you drove in on, the makeup that you put on your face, the clothes you're wearing on your body, the water bottle that you drank out of this morning, the coffee cup that you drank out of this morning. Everything that you own, everything that you touch, everything that you smell has oil in it, one way or another. So, yeah, it makes sense that we should probably be producing more of that. And we're like 150 years from even developing a suitable alternative. Yeah. I mean, it's not even close. Maybe the alternatives that we have right now, solar will eventually be a replacement for it. We're just a long way from it being effective. We don't have the transmission lines to support
we
that
don't have
type
the
of
storage. Is the big bottleneck.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we just don't have the capability of doing it. Will we one day? Sure. Not right now, So there's a lot of economic value, and so I would be more concerned about foreign agencies coming in and buying land with oil on it. Is what I would be concerned about. Maybe the only reason they haven't done that is because it's just been regulated. So maybe that's a concern. That's an interesting argument for regulation. It keeps the foreign agencies from buying the oil.
Hard to steal.
That's interesting. Never thought about that before. That just occurred to me.
An epiphany.
So, yeah, but there are some economic dominance kind of arguments that people make over that. But as it stands, I would have to do a lot better than what it's doing for that to be. So what are the arguments for? What are the benefits for Chinese land purchases? The creation of jobs. I mean, how many jobs does 500,000 acres of timber produce? That's a great question for Gemini. How many timber jobs does 500,000 acres produce? Yeah, that's going to be a hard number to figure out. The timber industry in New York employs about 40,000 people, though. 55,000 people.
Guess that.
There's a lot more people involved in it than I thought. That's just one state. That's interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I guess from clearing to driving to transport to, I wonder if the milling and production of goods is included in that as well, if that would all be kind of considered the same industry, because you got that wood, it's coming down, it's being created not only into timber, but into paper, into pulp, into, composites, it's like there's all kinds of stuff being created with that wood. So, yeah.
So in Idaho has laws that restrict foreign direct investment in certain real estate and other properties. We have House Bill 173, passed in 2023, just last year, prohibits foreign governments and state-controlled enterprises from purchasing, acquiring, or holding an interest in agricultural land, water rights, mining claims, or mineral rights in Idaho.
Yeah, that came about. I think that came about probably because of the fear that they were going to try and come in and claim rights over the water in the aquifer. Remember when they were sending out that stuff where they were telling everybody to claim your water rights now, and they were sending you to the Department of I guess it was the Idaho Department of Agriculture, Water, or something. I can't remember. But you'd fill out that paper, and then you would claim your water rights on your well. Because I guess there was some powers from out of state that were wanting to claim that aquifer was theirs. Probably from Washington.
Probably.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm glad they did that.
Then we have House Bill 496 signed into law just this past March, amends that Bill 173 to include forest land as a type of real property subject to the restriction.
Nice.
And then existing law states that a foreign filing entity or foreign limited liability partnership must register to do business in Idaho. So we're pretty well protected.
Unfortunately, a good majority of our land in Idaho is owned by the federal government.
Yeah, and we've done an episode on that before.
So yeah, definitely look that up because
not too long back.
Yeah, there's a lot of land that that the federal government's in control of in the state of Idaho. Another argument for the land purchase from China is such investments can foster stronger economic ties between the two nations. Again, I don't buy that. It doesn't
It's
make
hard,
any sense. Like,
hard
how
to see the upside to that with a country like China, a country like Italy, kind of a,
maybe you're kind of beneficially kind of working off of one another. But like with countries like China, the only way to really affect trade with a foreign nation like that is through the use of import export. It would be tariffs. It would be, favorable tax treatments for corporations to move back and forth, or less favorable to keep them from going. It's like there's a lot of things you can do to control that, but I don't see the purchase of land as being a way to foster good trade between a nation. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, to me, it kind of smacks of, you get into second, third, and fourth order consequences of things. It's like, well, we'll let your billionaire businessman who's also influential in your government buy this land over here if you'll let us import these products here, which does this, and then we'll pass a law that gives you a loophole over here, and we'll give you some tax benefits on top of it.
Yeah.
There's this whole package deal thing.
Yeah.
That once they start to fall apart, and it's like, well, how come he owns all this land here? Oh, well, that was that deal, years ago, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it's like these things are also kind of like weirdly nefariously tied together.
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of gross.
Everything's got to be transparent on the surface, direct.
Yeah, and then
for one.
Letting them have land just seems like giving them a space to kind of operate almost. Like, I don't. How does that? I guess it would work the same. I guess the federal government would have the same kind of leeway in their land that they would have in mine. So not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I own my land, so they don't have a whole lot of say in what happens on my land, except for like my local government has like restrictions. I can't think of any federal restrictions I have on my land. I have federal restrictions on the airspace above my land.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know that. Like if I launch my drone, I have to let the app know where I'm launching it at because there's restrictions. And so you can only go you can only go so far above your land before you start encroaching into FAA controlled airspace.
Yeah. So
it's interesting. I don't know the upside to that. I just don't see. I don't. A lot of these arguments are just kind of like weird to me, like the manipulation of market forces and land ownership helps to increase market forces. It's like land ownership doesn't do that. Like a lot of industry leases land and is capable of manipulating market forces through lease. So I'm not sure how land ownership is. Maybe there's an economist out there that can answer that question. Maybe if you're listening to this, a little bit more about economy than we do, and you can answer that question. Like, what would be the economic gain of a country owning United States land over them just leasing it? What would be the economic benefit to the United States?
I would think it would have to be, some long-term time benefits. For example, I don't know, do we lease the land or do we own the land in Turkey that has our main Middle Eastern Air Force base?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That gives us a foothold in that region to be able to monitor and defend and secure the national interests there. I can't imagine we're on a temporary lease basis that a coup in Turkey could wind up kicking us out of the region.
Yeah.
So there's probably a treaty that covers that, which is, what is a treaty?
It's probably
that
several
involves
thousand
land.
bombs that ensure that too.
Yeah.
I mean,
And in their case, I'm
just
sure
saying.
we prop up their economy over there with all of our people spending
Yep.
money. And
Yep. Well, not only that, it's like how much money are they saving on their defense by just having an American presence there?
yeah,
I mean, it's like the benefit of having a standing American force on a base in your country, if you're a country like Turkey, is pretty substantial.
yeah, it's huge.
Just the fact that it's there, not that it's actually doing anything, because like who's going to go in and attack the country? What happens if you come in and you hit an American plane? It's like, well, all of a sudden now you're at war with America. It's like you don't want that. I mean, it's like I was watching, there's a podcast with a bunch of military guys and they were talking about, just how significant the United States military is. And they were saying that if all of the armies in the world were to array themselves against the United States of America, and it was not nuclear conflict, that the entirety of the world could not match the United States armed forces. Think about that. I mean, technologically, there's no comparison. Navy, Air Force, any of it. Our special forces. I mean, it's like there's a lot of investment into the might of the American, armed forces. So yeah, I mean, how much money is Turkey saving by just having, a couple of bombers over there? It's like, how much is that costing America to have a foothold in there? It's like, is it worth it? Well, yeah, for sure it is.
Yeah,
having an Air Force base in a place like Turkey, I mean, that puts you within range of anything in that region. So yeah, that's pretty valuable. That's a good deal.
mm-hmm.
But can you imagine if China were to come over here and buy a bunch of land and then ask if they could build an Air Force base?
Well, we kind of went through that exercise with Cuba, right?
Did we?
Well, with Russia.
Oh yeah,
missiles into Cuba.
Yep.
That whole crisis. I mean, that was getting real.
Yeah. I guess even like in Mexico or something, like we would be like, nope, not going to happen. But yeah, imagine if we were like Turkey and we had foreign powers with their own bases on our land. That's such a weird concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't think about from their perspective how strange that must be. Although they're probably pretty used to that. But for us, that's just a really strange concept that we would have a foreign agency with a military presence on our soil.
Yeah. Kind of like the Pearl Harbor attack.
Yeah.
If they would have won and Japan took over Hawaii.
Oh, man. Could you imagine?
We'd probably still be at war.
Oh, gosh. That would be wild. So, in any case, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I kind of go back to kind of what I was talking about before. It's like I don't really understand what the benefit is, and I don't really know what the out is. But it seems to me that if it were a real problem, that you could go in and just draw a line in the sand and say, look, we're not selling any of our sovereignty anymore to foreign agencies. We'll lease you the land if you want. But then,
upon approval, review, and supervision.
But then again, on the other hand, then you're potentially encroaching upon the rights of the individuals that own that land. And then if the government does that, then who owns the land after that? Is that more land owned by the nation? So Yeah, there's no easy answers. It just seems to me like it's too complicated, too many layers of bureaucracy to make it worth doing. Yeah, if I were a person that owned 100,000 acres of land and had some guy from China wanting to buy it, man, I don't know. It just seems like there's just too much weirdness that I would not want to do it.
Yeah. It's permanent.
Yeah.
You can't buy back, most likely. There's no do-overs on that one.
I mean, kind of like what I was saying. You could take it back. I mean, it's like that. I mean, literally, you could take the deed as the commander in chief of the United States military and say, "Look, you no longer own this land. We can give you the fair market value for it if you would like, or we can just take it. Which one do you want?" And let them choose. I think that's fair.
Sounds like a Trump deal.
Maybe that's why I like him so much. Maybe he thinks a lot of the same ways that I do. I just, I don't see the benefits of it. I think it's probably a bad idea. And I'm not sure that, I think that here's another way of looking at it. Any transaction that takes place over the national borders of the United States of America should be under the United States purview, the government purview. Mm-hmm. If you do an interstate deal, there are powers that be that direct how that works. If you don't believe that, then go try and use your credit card in Washington to buy marijuana. You can't. You can only buy it with cash. And the reason is because if you were to go in and purchase it with your debit card, you'd be committing a federal crime because it would then be interstate. Mm-hmm. Isn't that bonkers? Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if they have that much control over interstate commerce, then why couldn't they control commerce that's extending beyond our borders? It's like, okay, we want to sell this to China. It's like, no, you can't. We're no longer selling land to foreign agencies. You can sell to an American company, but that company will never be Chinese. Mm-hmm. So, maybe that's one way of looking at it.
Well, I would hope that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy in their new agency, whatever it's going to be.
Doge.
It's not going to be in the government, but the oversight of the government could put some leverage on these agencies that's already their mandate. Yeah. Is to review these things and balance national security and economic interests with what we would be getting.
Yeah.
And tighten down on it. Just do your job.
Yeah.
I think a lot of federal agencies.
Oh, there's so much fat.
They just need to do their job.
Yeah. There's so much fat that nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of those agencies, they don't really have a job anymore. So what they do is they create jobs for themselves. Yeah. It's one of the things that Vivek was talking about. It's like he's got some great ideas for that. Like one of his things that he had said is that one of the things that he would do initially was he would go and he would get the Social Security numbers of all the employees of all federal agencies. And he would say, if your Social Security number ends with an even number, you're fired. And then he would say, then I would go and I would look at the beginning of the Social Security number. And at the beginning of your Social Security number, if it begins with an odd number, you're fired. And then he says that would be a 75% reduction in the federal workforce right off the bat, with no chance of any kind of lawsuits for discrimination because it was based on a number. And your number was up. So go find a private sector job.
So would that exclude the executive branch?
Well, it would be, it wouldn't be, it couldn't be anything that was appointed, or it couldn't be anything that was elected. But most of those agencies, a lot of the agencies that have a lot of these people that are working for them, none of those people were appointed, nor were they elected. Yeah. They were just hired. So
There's a lot of key positions in the rank and file that would be severely hampered if that was done that way. There'd have to be some additional factors at play.
yeah, like what do you mean?
Well, like you can imagine, you're going to lose 75% of our SEAL force, 75% of
Well,
our
it wouldn't be.
military
It wouldn't be.
pilots.
It wouldn't be. I think he's talking about agencies like the FDA, the non-military,
non-critical.
Yeah, I don't think that they could do that with military personnel because that would fall under the direct purview of the president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they would have any power to be able to do that. But a lot of these federal agencies that, like the FBI, the CIA, the DEA,
IRS.
the IRS, a lot of these agencies are operating outside of the Constitution anyways because they don't have any mandate to exist. They just are there. And so, there's a lot of fat that can be torn away, and a lot of money saved.
Yeah, what is it? There's 2.3 million federal employees now?
Oh gosh, it's an incredibly
enormous.
large number, enormous number, and
growing.
like a third of those work for the IRS because they want our money. I'm just kidding. I don't know that number, but there's a lot of them. They just hired a bunch of new agents for the IRS. So in any case, I don't know what the answer is to land ownership in China, but I think it's interesting to know the numbers. And if you're going to continue to have this debate and this conversation with people in your kind of influence sphere, as it were, then it's probably good to have the information.
Yeah.
And do a little bit more research. And I approach it from a little bit more of a truth angle, because there's a lot of misinformation on both sides of that equation. To think that there's nothing to worry about is probably ridiculous. To think that there's everything to worry about is also probably ridiculous.
Yeah.
The truth is usually right in the middle somewhere.
I think the bigger issue with China really is the amount of our national debt that they own.
Yeah.
I think we're way vulnerable to that than we are to land ownership, because that is getting worse and worse, and it's affecting us all every day in inflation, the money market, all of that, and it's just getting worse, and we have no plan to resolve it. And it's at the whim of the Chinese Communist Party as to what they do with that. So that can cripple us overnight. And so we need to get our national debt under control. And we've done a couple of podcasts on that in the past with people who are smarter than us.
Yeah, no doubt.
Agree.
Well, let's see. As of November 2024, China owns $774.6 billion in U.S. debt, making it the second largest foreign holder of U.S. debt. Japan is the largest holder with $1.13 trillion in treasury securities. China is second. United Kingdom is third. They own almost as much as China does. And then you have Cayman Islands.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's because the banks are there.
Yeah.
Luxembourg. Some weird stuff going on there, man, with that debt. Yeah, we need to get that paid down. That's another thing I always I thought about too. It's like, what if one day we just said, yeah, we've decided we're not going to pay that back. What are you going to do about it?
We're sorry.
We're sorry. We'll give you some favorable tariffs. What are you going to do about it? I mean, that's probably why I shouldn't run for office, because I would just I have the nature to be a little bit bullish,
disagreeableness,
a little bit bullish about stuff like that. It's like, could you imagine getting an interest bill from China for the national debt, and them saying, okay, well, you got to pay your bill. What would happen if we just said, nah? It's like, oh, well, it would spiral the economy out of control, and you'd go into a recession, and then you'd go into, it's like, would we? I don't know. What would happen? I would have people investigating that. I'm sure they already have. And then they determine that there's some kind of economic reason why you can't do that. That it would destroy the dollar or whatever, I don't know. But just in my own mind, it's like if I had that much power and influence and my bank came and sent me a mortgage payment and said, okay, your mortgage is due. And I said, nah, it's not. Like, what would happen? Would they come and evict me? Like, if I had that much power to say that, it's not like you're going to evict me, So I was like, what are you going to do? So I don't. That's just kind of, I don't know. That's a terrible way to think about that. That's a very unchristian way of thinking about that, by the way. Don't think that way. That's a terrible way to think. But in any case, yeah, there's a lot. So let's not talk about that anymore.
Okay.
What do you have? You have any final thoughts, Ken? Any final thoughts?
Well, when I think about these things, I think about the economy. I think about our national debt because that's a promise that we've made that we need to keep.
Yeah.
We need to fix that. Just thinking in terms of the United States as a moral entity, we need to uphold our promises. And like I said, I'm not that concerned about foreign ownership of land here, so long as then the national security interests are covered and it's been reviewed and people are keeping an eye on it. But as a Christian, I think the bigger point is we don't need to get so tied up in these issues of national sovereignty over and above our sovereign king, the one that we serve. And so as 1 Peter 2, verses 11 and 12 tell us, Beloved, I beg you as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul, having your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may, by your good works which they observe, glorify God in the day of visitation. So I just want to remind us all, this is not our home. This is not our permanent home. We're just passing through. We're just taking up space here for a time, and we're moving on eventually. And so the way that we conduct ourselves in the world says a lot about the king that we serve. And so we need to conduct ourselves in an honorable way, in a moral way, with good works, with compassion, but also with justice, with logic, so that God is glorified through our lives and that our testimony of our life says something about the king that we serve. Yeah. So that's what I always come back to as you reduce these things, these arguments down to their moral issues. We've been given a mandate to conduct ourselves in the world in a certain way, and that's what we should follow.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, and that, folks, is why people like Ken Billing are on the pastoral staff, because left up to my own devices, it would not be good.
Tell them all to pound salt.
Yeah, pound sand, China. No, it's a great point. The morality of America is important, and that's one way that you demonstrate that you are moral, by fulfilling your obligations. And so, yeah, it's a great way of putting that. Great way of putting that. Thank you. Well, that about does it for us today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you have a comment or a question or an idea for an episode, send us an email to 3p@ethelbaptistchurch.org. If your idea gets used on the show, you could be the proud recipient of the now world infamous 3P coffee mug, which does indeed make your coffee taste better. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks again to ABC and its members for their generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember the Great Commission. Go into all the world, reach the lost with the gospel, and build disciples who can do the same. And with that, we are out.